What's up, guys? Welcome back to Jimmy Talks. So I wanted to make a video on the ADL because it's very influential and it's been around for a long time. And, a long time, it's been over a century they've been around. And this one organization has positioned itself as America's moral arbiter on hate. It claims to fight bigotry while amassing an unbelievable amount of power in politics and finances to silence people who criticize them. Its name is the Anti-Defamation League, or the ADL. And the origin story, where it all started, which we will go over, is not about just protecting innocent people, it's actually about protecting power. It began not out of righteousness, but actually with a scandal. In 1913, a young girl was murdered in Atlanta, Georgia. A man was convicted by a jury of his peers based on overwhelming evidence in a lawful, legal courtroom. But what happened next would change American discourse forever. Wealthy interest groups launched a massive campaign to overturn that verdict, not in the courtroom, but in the court of public opinion by crying prejudice. Today, that same strategy has become their weapon of choice. They've built an empire on a single, dangerous idea: that any criticism of their agenda, or in other words, Israel, is hatred. They spy on Americans, they smear political opponents, and they work tirelessly to shut down free speech. So now, before we get into it, hit the like and subscribe button. If you've been watching a while, or if you have not been watching a while, just know that this is a America First dissident right-wing channel. Just know what you're getting into. I like to be very upfront and straightforward with people. And like it on Rumble, follow me on X, where we get a lot more based. In case I get banned on YouTube as well, you will be able to see updates from me. So now let's get into the origins of the ADL. And as I said earlier, it wasn't built out of a principle, it was built out of a scandal, actually. The ADL was born to subvert the American judicial system and protect specific interests following a really graphic crime. Its origin, which I said earlier, was in 1913 in Atlanta, Georgia, and it involved a woman named Mary Fagan, who was 13 years old, and she worked in a factory. She was murdered by the accused suspect, who was named Leo Frank, who was a 31-year-old Jewish man. Leo Frank was from Texas, but he moved to Atlanta, Georgia, to partake in child factories and making money off of them. But anyways, as we said, he moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and he got himself involved with the local Jewish community. And as I'll point out, it is totally okay for some groups to be very involved in themselves, but it's a civil rights violation for other groups to stand up for themselves. Of course, the Civil Rights Act was not even around back then, but you get what I'm saying. It shows a very strong pattern here. Anyways, Leo Frank was involved in a local group called the B'nai B'rith in Atlanta, and he was elected to be the president of this fraternal organization, which is the one who really went hard and was a major player in even starting the ADL. So now let's fast forward to the actual murder itself, because the evidence against Leo Frank is substantial and convincing to a jury of his peers who sat through the entire trial. The case had lots of evidence that was implicating Leo Frank in the strangulation of a 13-year-old girl. So, found next to Mary's body was a note, written on a company order form, which read, "Ma'am, that Negro hire down here did this. I went to make water and he pushed me down that hole. A long, tall Negro black, that who it was, long, slim, tall Negro, I write while play with me." And yes, I said it like that because that's what the note looked like. So does anyone else find it very convenient that apparently there was a note saying, "Hey, I'm the guy who did it"? It's like writing a bunch of swear words on the wall in the bathroom and then saying someone's name, blah, 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 was here. Like, are you kidding me? And this was actually what was used in the trials. Like, does anyone actually believe in this? But it was also said in the trial that the long, tall Negro, as it was said in the note, was not a literal description, but a metaphorical one for Leo Frank himself, which was a tall, imposing authority figure who had assaulted her. So next, we'll go to the star witness, which just breaks everything down, which is the testimony of Jim Conley, who is a black sweeper at the factory. He was a janitor, and he was detailed and he was damning in what he had to say. Now, despite his criminal record, his account for what happened remained consistent under a very rigorous cross-examination from multiple people. He stated that Leo Frank regularly used him as a lookout while he had, let's just say, illicit encounters with women. If you catch my drift, he was paying women to do stuff. And he had said that one day Frank had summoned him on the day of the murder to confess he had accidentally killed a girl, and that he helped Frank move the body to the basement. So his knowledge of the crime scene and the events was way too specific to be easily dismissed as simple fabrication. Then Leo Frank had told Conley to move the body to the basement by the elevator and instructed Conley to write the notes claiming Frank had dictated them to throw suspicion onto a black person. Conley then described in detail how he stood guard and later helped dispose of the body, as well as the fact that Leo Frank was the only supervisory official in the building at the time of the murder. Multiple witnesses placed Mary Fagan entering the factory to collect her pay, and Frank was the last known person to see her alive. And it's also got some inconsistent and shifting statements. Leo Frank's own account of his activities that day changed several times. His initial alibi was weak, and it was contradicted by other employee testimony regarding his whereabouts and his actions during the time frame of the murder. And we've also got several young female employees testifying about Frank's inappropriate and unsettling behavior towards them, which suggests a pattern of conduct that made the prosecution's motive of an attempted sexual assault plausible. And again, the next piece of evidence was the murder weapon that was believed to be a cord from a factory machine, placing the crime squarely within the factory environment that Leo Frank controlled. And after the murder, Frank appeared nervous and distraught. He was reported to have made statements expressing fear that the Negroes would throw the blame on a white man. Now, why would you say that after that silly note? Now, let's fast forward to the guilty verdict, and it was delivered by a local jury that heard all of the evidence, but that was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of a new kind of political operation. The response to Frank's conviction revealed a powerful network willing to defend its interests by any means necessary. A well-funded campaign was launched, which was primarily funded by wealthy Jews in the northern United States. As you have to remember, the Civil War was not that long ago, so there was still a big sentiment of the northern versus the southern, which is a critical piece of context here, as we'll see. But also, just to mention that there was just a lot more Jews living in the north than there was in the south. But a lot of these Jews were from the emerging Hollywood industry, which they are still heavily involved in, and it was also led by the American Jewish Committee, which is now a very powerful NGO that is involved with political activism. So the concern of these new groups that were getting involved financially to try to win Leo Frank his supposed innocence, their concern was not necessarily the concept of justice, but it was really just public relations and trying to save a Jewish man from being convicted of murdering a Christian girl. This threatened to fuel anti-Jewish sentiment, they thought, and that prospect was deemed an existential threat that needed to be neutralized, because there was just no way we could have a 31-year-old Jewish man murdering a child, a white Gentile Christian girl. So what did they do exactly? This campaign did not seek to overturn the verdict by simply just disproving the evidence in a fair, legal manner. Like, hey, we didn't actually do it, he didn't actually do it, and here's how. Instead, it employed a strategy that would become the ADL's hallmark, which is narrative control through accusations of bigotry. Northern newspapers, which were influenced by this financial and social pressure from all of the Jews in New York City, were flooded with propaganda painting the entire state of Georgia and its judicial system as a backward mob that just wanted to lynch people and consumed by an irrational hatred of Jews. Maybe it was just because he murdered the girl. The goal here, though, was to create enough external pressure to override the judicial process. So basically, all they wanted to do was attack the integrity of the Southern judicial system and portray the conviction as solely the product of anti-Semitic prejudice. And they wanted to make outrage in national newspapers, putting political pressure on Georgia's governor, and save their little buddy with a cover-up that was not true and it was fabricated, and Leo Frank actually did it. So, as we mentioned, they were going after the governor of Georgia, right? So eventually that pressure did get to him. In June of 1915, just mere days before he was supposed to leave office, Governor John Slayton of Georgia commuted Leo Frank's death sentence to just life in prison. His stated reason was a supposed, air quote, doubt about the verdict, but his actions suggest cynical political calculation instead. He was bowing to the immense pressure of powerful Jewish money from outside his state, likely believing it would elevate his national stature. This act was a profound betrayal of the Georgia judicial system, which he was in charge of, and a rejection of the jury's verdict. And, to add insult to injury, it was also for the public who witnessed the trial. It demonstrated that with enough financial clout and media influence, a verdict could be politically nullified. This still happens today. The rightful public outrage over this corruption of justice led to the formation of the Knights of Mary Fagin, who eventually did end up carrying out the original court-mandated sentence that the governor had taken away. And to make a long story short, Leo Frank was found and he was killed by an angry mob. And regardless of if I think he did it or not, and I do think that he did it, I do still not like mob justice. I'm very consistent in my views. We'll just let the court system play it out. I know how that went, but it still rubs me in quite the wrong way that the court system was even usurped in this kind of manner, and it wasn't carried out in a lawful, justice-oriented situation like it was supposed to. So, do I kind of understand the mob? Yes. But do I like it necessarily and think that this should be a precedent and that we should set? No. Actually, no. And it's quite the shame that we had to resort to mob violence because the court system couldn't do what we trusted them to do. But anyways, back to the story. In direct response to this backlash against their failed campaign of a murder cover-up, Sigmund Livingston founded the ADL in 1913, and its whole entire founding purpose was to, air quote, stop the defamation of the Jewish people. And it was directly transpired because of the Leo Frank narrative. But what the ADL has started doing is institutionalizing the strategy that was deployed in Leo Frank's case, which was any criticism of the actions of specific individuals or groups, any unwelcome revelation, any challenge to a preferred narrative could be framed as not a factual dispute, but as a defamation or bigotry. The ADL was created as a permanent political weapon to ensure that a challenge to certain interests would never again proceed without a powerful, organized counterattack on the challenger's character. Now, let's move on from the Leo Frank case and we'll go through their evolution in time of how they've really just become a political weapon. Now, over the decades, the ADL has vastly expanded its mission, transforming from an organization focused on a specific type of defamation into a broad-based political advocacy group with a notorious reputation for unfair attacks. Its primary methods remain exactly the same as we just said. The strategic use of labels to silence opposition, and by using money to back up these institutions that will back them, in other words, institutional backing, but its targets have widened to include anyone who challenges its ideological or political preferences. The ADL's most potent and abused weapon is its irrational and expansive definition of, air quote, anti-Semitism. The organization has systematically worked to conflate these three distinct concepts. The first one is just classic anti-Semitism, which is an actual hatred or violence directed at Jewish people as individuals or a group based on their ethnicity or religion. And the second one is criticism of the Israeli government, which is disagreeing with the policies of the State of Israel created in 1948, such as the treatment of the Palestinian people, or the expansion of settlements, or its military actions. And the third one is criticism of Jewish influence or power, which is discussing the demonstrated overrepresentation of certain groups in media, finance, and politics, or criticizing the activities of lobbying organizations like AIPAC and the AJC. So the ADL deliberately merges these categories all together. A person, for instance, who is criticizing Israel and Gaza and saying, hey, we probably shouldn't genocide all of them, which I do agree with, is then smeared with the same label as someone who is promoting actual violence towards some random Jewish person for no reason at all. These are not the same or equal things. This is not a mistake, though. It's actually a deliberate silencing technique. It makes honest debate about Israeli policy or the nature of institutional power impossible, because it simply just frames criticism as genuine hatred of a whole entire group of people. And I've caught flack on here time and time again. I actually don't hate anybody. I'm able to recognize patterns, but that doesn't mean that I inherently hate everyone. We are all created in God's image. It's actually a very distinct difference to simply just notice pattern recognition and take individuals as they are and to blanket hate a bunch of people. I can blatantly point out that the Jewish state of Israel controls America, arguably, and with multiple different points. Does that mean that I hate all Jewish people, though? No, actually, it doesn't. It's really not that complicated. I can also point out crime rates by race. Does that mean that I hate all of them, though? No, actually, it doesn't. I just take it for what it is. That's just how the world is. But anyways, the purpose is to actually put the person who's criticizing on the defensive by forcing them to deny being a bigot rather than to defend the substance of their argument. This tactic is employed very much so against Christians, immigration reform advocates such as myself, and anyone else who's to the right of Karl Marx. The ADL maintains extensive and often just plain up not true hate group lists and extremism reports. Mainstream organizations that advocate for securing borders, preserving Western culture, or questioning globalism are routinely labeled as white supremacist, anti-Semitic, or hate groups. These labels are not merely opinions, they are actionable smears. The ADL actively provides these lists to social media companies, financial institutions, and payment processors, who then use them to justify deplatforming, denying service, and financially isolating these individuals and groups. This is a form of extrajudicial punishment, and it's a corporate censorship regime enabled by the ADL's illegitimate authority as a moral arbiter. The only person who can go and tell me about morals is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So for the ADL to try and swoop in and try to make these labels themselves is just blatantly something to not listen to, okay? I'll just put it like that. Don't listen to them. Now, it gets even worse, because beyond the smear campaign, the ADL has a long and disturbing history of acting as an unaccountable foreign intelligence agency. Yes, I'm going to go there, and these words are accurate to what I'm about to say. Just stick by me for a second. So, in 1993, there is a scandal with the San Francisco Police Department, the SFPD, and there was just a glimpse into their standard practices. There's probably stuff that the public doesn't even know about due to non-disclosure agreements and also just secrecy. But anyways, it was revealed that the ADL's, air quote, researcher, Roy Bullock, had for years been trading information with numerous police officers across the country, building an enormous private database on thousands of American citizens. The targets were not criminals either, but they were just activists who were peacefully demonstrating their opinions. It was also politicians. It was also labor organizers. And it was also others engaged in legal political activity, but it was deemed problematic by the ADL. This private spying apparatus collecting data without oversight or consent is the action of a hostile NGO, not a civil rights organization. The ADL's alignment with interests of a foreign nation, which is obviously Israel, further compromises its claim to be an American civil rights organization. While there's really no what we could call a smoking gun from Mossad, we can see that the congruence is obviously undeniable. The ADL's advocacy dovetails perfectly with the strategic objectives of the Israeli government, which is silencing criticism of Israel in the U.S., promoting laws that equate such criticism with hate speech, as we've seen with Trump's anti-Semitism laws, and neutralizing political opponents of unconditional American support for Israel. It acts as a force multiplier for Israeli Hasbara, which is propaganda within American borders, effectively functioning as a lobby that targets domestic dissenters rather than just lobbying lawmakers. Its efforts to influence U.S. policy are not primarily for American benefit, but for the benefit of a foreign nation. Now, I will say this, I will leave what I think would be some solutions to this, because I do typically do this at the end of my videos. Not on all of them, but on a lot of them. The ADL's influence, in my opinion, they're not invincible. They can be countered through a multifaceted strategy that leverages law, finance, mostly public awareness and the building of parallel institutions. The goal is to defund, discredit, and displace its illegitimate authority as the moral arbiter on what's deemed as wrong and right in American society. So, what people need to do is to pressure lawmakers, and we'll see this over time as Gen Z starts to get into politics. You don't believe me? We'll make a bet on it. We'll make a bet and see what happens. But anyways, we will start making these kinds of groups register under the Foreign Agents Registration Acts. They need to be registered under FARA as a foreign agent. And why would someone say that? And I would laugh if someone came up to my face and said that. Why would you want them to be a foreign agent? Because they obviously aren't. Well, actually, it's pretty fucking simple. Any organization or group that primarily advocates for the policies of a foreign government must be forced to register as such, which shows that they have foreign alignment. Duh. Now, next, this starts at the local level, and this is why I say local politics are so important, just as much so as the presidency. But a lot of the money from the ADL, it comes from the taxpayer. And if you don't believe me, there is contracts for, air quote, diversity training from the ADL, or, air quote, again, hate crime monitoring, which are often used to advance the ADL's partisan worldview into public institutions. Next, we need to have more privacy laws. We need to advocate for stronger state and federal laws against the unauthorized collection and trafficking of private data on citizens by NGOs, which are non-governmental organizations that do not have the American interest at the tip of the spear and as the most forefront and important issue to them. And we also need one more thing. We need to support defamation lawsuits from the ADL. Financially and legally support people and the groups who have been clearly defamed by the ADL's false, air quote, hate labels. You need to start winning judgments, and you can create a powerful financial deterrent against the ADL's smear tactics. Next, there needs to be a little bit of public awareness and education. Reclaim the language. Vigorously challenge the ADL's fraudulent definitions. We need to draw clear and unwavering distinctions between legitimate criticism and actual hatred. Refuse to accept their framing. That's a huge part of being a man, because most people watch these videos, they are men. A huge part is frame control in your life. That's just a little bit of sauce from Jimmy real quick. I'll give you some fucking free sauce, like I always do. A big part of life is controlling your frame and the frame of conversations. When someone is accused of anti-Semitism, for criticizing Israel, reject that premise altogether. Don't play into their frame. And you need to force the conversation back to the factual merits of the criticism. Next, we need to make people know about the history of the ADL. The story of the Leo Frank case and the ADL's founding must become common knowledge. Documentaries, long-form articles, books, social media campaigns, this should all just meticulously detail the organization's history of spying, smearing, and narrative manipulation. But overall, the best thing to do is to build a strong community, because the best defense against divisive narratives is strong, local, cohesive communities that are rooted in shared values and mutual support. And lastly, but not finally, we need to support courageous leaders who are able to stand up against these things, and they are the people who will take the heat for you. I hate to quote Trump because he's really just not our guy anymore, but when I was a supporter of him and he said, they're really all just after you, I'm just the one who's standing in the way. We need leadership who is actually like that. Now, Trump isn't like that anymore, don't get it twisted, but we need somebody who's going to do that for you all. And for someone who's getting up on YouTube and kind of explaining all these narrative lies and bullshit and deception, before I possibly get banned for one reason or another that's bullshit, I am that person who's volunteering to do that for you. You need to support politicians and public figures who are not afraid to condemn the ADL's overreach as well as Israel, and who prioritize American interests and America first, and free speech over the fear of being smeared by a foreign NGO. You need to publicly applaud people who stand up to the bullying of the Israel lobby. I'm not talking about, hey guys, come glaze me, Jimmy, because really I'm just a nobody when it comes down to all this shit. I'm just a guy. But right now we can see this publicly with someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene or somebody like Thomas Massie. While they are not totally perfect to me, before I even get this in the comments, oh, you support them? Maybe not necessarily, but they are standing up to something that's very important. and I can at least point out and recognize that aspect in them. But I am going to leave off on this. The ADL poses a unique threat to free speech, honest discourse, and national sovereignty. It's a politically motivated group that hides behind the language of civil rights while engaging in deflection, espionage, and character assassination. Its power derives from the fear that it instills into people and the complicity of institutions that accept its authority uncritically. By exposing its origins in the corruption of the Leo Frank case, rejecting its fraudulent labels, cutting off its funding, and building resilient alternative institutions, Americans can break its influence. The goal is to restore a public square where speech is free, debate is robust, and no private organization has the power to destroy lives for disagreeing with it. All right, guys, that's all for me today. Very important topic I've been wanting to make a video on for quite some time. Don't forget, if you liked the video, hit the like button. It helps me out. We're going to keep on making videos like this. And if you want to be a patriot and in the fight for American sovereignty, hit that motherfucking like button. I'm telling you to do it, please. Actually, I'm asking you to do it. I'm not telling you. And if you like the videos and you watch them a lot, or maybe you're just new here, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. We've got more juicy-based videos coming out just for you, the American patriot who is America first and only. Follow me on X. We get a lot more based. Follow me on Rumble in case YouTube decides to nuke me because I'm telling too many truths. All right, guys, that's all for me today. Like I always say at the end of my videos, America first and only. God bless you and your families. Christ is King. Jimmy Talks out.